Innocent actions become crimes when the person performing them doesn't match expectations of innocence. Bridget Coleman pressed the elevator button for the lobby. She was running late for the closing session of the Pediatric Nursing Conference. Her badge was clipped to her blazer. Her conference materials were in her shoulder bag. She was thinking about the presentation she had just attended on neonatal care protocols. The elevator arrived at the 8th floor. The doors opened. A baby was inside, alone, sitting in an infant carrier in the back corner, maybe 6 months old, screaming, face red, distressed in a way that indicated this wasn't normal fussiness. Bridget's training activated immediately. She stepped into the elevator, checked the hallway behind her. No parent rushing back. No one is calling for help. Just an abandoned infant in a moving elevator. She knelt beside the carrier, assessed the baby, breathing normally. No visible injuries, but terrified. She picked up the carrier. The baby needed help. Someone needed to find this child's parents immediately. The elevator doors closed, descended to the lobby. When they opened, 3 security guards were waiting. They saw a black woman holding someone else's baby. They made assumptions faster than Bridget could speak. Bridget Coleman was a pediatric intensive care nurse at Children's Memorial Hospital. She had worked in critical infant care for 12 years. She held advanced certifications in neonatal resuscitation, pediatric advanced life support, and child abuse recognition. She earned $68,000 annually and saved children's lives for a living. She was 36, single. She had no children of her own, but had cared for thousands of other people's children through illness, injury, and trauma. She recognized distress in infants the way other people recognized familiar faces. She was in this hotel for a 3-day conference on advances in pediatric critical care. She had presented on a panel about family-centered care in PICU settings. She was respected in her field, professional, credentialed, exactly the kind of person hospitals trusted with their most vulnerable patients. But standing in that hotel elevator, holding someone else's crying baby, none of her credentials mattered. What mattered was that she was a black woman. The baby was white, and the security guards had received training that emphasized stranger danger and suspicious behavior. Bridget understood immediately what was happening. She had lived 36 years learning to recognize when people saw her as a threat before seeing her as a person. She knew this situation was dangerous. She knew every movement she made would be interpreted through suspicion. She also knew that the baby needed help, and she was a pediatric nurse, and her professional obligation didn't stop existing because security guards had poor judgment. The lead security guard stepped forward. His name tag read, Gerald Pritchard. His hand was on his radio. His voice was loud, commanding, the kind of voice designed to establish authority through volume. He told Bridget to put the baby down, step away from the carrier, keep her hands visible. Bridget spoke calmly. She said her name. She said she was a pediatric nurse attending the conference. She said she had found this baby alone in the elevator on the 8th floor. The baby was in distress. She was trying to locate the parents and ensure the child was safe. Gerald said, "Put the baby down now." His hand moved toward his belt. Hotel security didn't carry weapons, but the gesture was clear. Threat assessment. Compliance demanded. Bridget set the carrier down gently, stepped back, raised her hands slightly. She said the baby needed a medical evaluation. The level of distress suggested the child had been alone for some time. Someone needed to check for dehydration, injury, or other medical issues. Gerald ignored her. He spoke into his radio, requested police backup, said they had a possible child abduction situation. A woman was found with an unattended infant. Unclear circumstances. Other guests were gathering, watching. Phones are coming out. This was going to be recorded. Bridget felt the familiar calculation. Stay calm. Don't give them any excuse to escalate. Document everything mentally. A hotel manager arrived, a woman in her 40s with an expensive suit and a stressed expression. She asked what was happening. Gerald explained. A baby had been reported missing from the 8th floor 3 minutes ago. The mother had put the baby in the carrier outside her room while she grabbed her purse, turned around, and the baby was gone. Security was reviewing footage when this woman appeared in the lobby carrying the child. The manager looked at Bridget. Her expression was already decided. Guilty until proven otherwise. Bridget repeated her explanation. She found the baby alone in the elevator. No parent present. She was bringing the child to the front desk to locate the parents and ensure medical evaluation. The manager asked why Bridget hadn't immediately called security. Why had she taken the baby with her? Why hadn't she stayed on the 8th floor? Bridget said she had acted on medical training. The baby was in distress in a moving elevator. She couldn't leave an infant unattended in an elevator that might go to any floor. She was bringing the child to the most logical location for reunion with parents and medical assessment. The manager's expression said she didn't believe any of this. 2 police officers arrived. The situation escalated. They asked for Bridget's identification, asked what she was doing in the hotel, asked her to explain again how she came to have the baby. Bridget provided her driver's license, her nursing license, her conference badge. She explained for the 3rd time, found a baby alone in the elevator, brought the baby to the lobby for safety and reunification. One officer asked if she had a room key. Bridget said yes. Room 412. She was a registered guest attending the pediatric nursing conference. The officer asked if she had children. Bridget said no. The implication was clear. Childless woman with a baby that wasn't hers. Suspicious. Have you ever had to explain innocent actions like they were crimes because of how you looked? Comment below if you've been treated as guilty while trying to help. I want to hear your stories. The baby's mother arrived. Running, crying, frantic. She saw the carrier and rushed to her baby, checked the child. The baby was still crying but unharmed. The mother turned to the police, asked what happened. Who took her baby? Gerald pointed at Bridget, said this woman was found with the child. They were investigating how the baby came to be in her possession. The mother's expression changed. Anger, relief. She looked at Bridget, asked why she took her baby. Bridget said very calmly that she didn't take anyone. She found the baby alone and crying in an elevator. She was a pediatric nurse. She was bringing the baby to the front desk to locate the parents. The mother said she had only stepped inside her room for 10 seconds. The baby was right outside, in the carrier. She heard the elevator ding and came out, and the baby was gone. Bridget said the elevator had clearly arrived at the 8th floor while the mother was inside. The doors opened. The baby was there, alone. The elevator had continued to descend with the baby inside. That was when Bridget found the child. Gerald interrupted, said they needed to review the security footage before making any determinations about what happened. The police officer said Bridget needed to wait. They would need a full statement. They might need to detain her pending investigation. Bridget felt cold anger settle in her chest. She was being treated like a criminal for protecting an abandoned baby. She had 12 years of pediatric nursing. She had saved children's lives. She had done nothing wrong, but she also knew that anger would be interpreted as guilt, that defending herself too forcefully would be seen as suspicious. So she stayed quiet, patient, waiting for the evidence to prove what she already knew. Where are you watching from? Have you ever been detained for doing the right thing? Drop a comment. They made Bridget wait in a hotel conference room. A security guard stood by the door, not guarding her exactly, but making clear she couldn't leave. The police were reviewing surveillance footage with hotel security. Bridget sat alone for 47 minutes. She thought about the irony. She spent her professional life caring for children whose parents trusted her completely. But in this hotel lobby, her presence with a child was immediately interpreted as criminal. She thought about the other guests who had watched. The phones recording. How many of them had seen a black woman with a white baby and immediately assumed kidnapping instead of help? How many had their biases confirmed by security's response? She thought about what would have happened if she had left the baby in that elevator. If she had prioritized her own safety over the child's welfare, the elevator could have continued to any floor. The baby could have been taken by someone with actual harmful intent. The child could have been injured. She had made the right choice. But right choices didn't always protect you from being punished for them. The door opened. The hotel manager entered. Her expression had changed. She looked uncomfortable now, not apologetic yet, but no longer certain. She said the surveillance footage showed exactly what Bridget had described. The mother placed the baby outside her room, stepped inside. The elevator arrived at that floor while the door was open. The carrier slid slightly toward the elevator. When the mother emerged seconds later, the elevator doors were closing with the baby inside. The footage showed Bridget entering the elevator on the 8th floor, showing visible surprise and concern, checking the hallway, assessing the baby, picking up the carrier carefully. The elevator is descending. Bridget was speaking to the baby in what was clearly a soothing manner. Then, the lobby footage. Bridget is stepping out of the elevator. 3 security guards were immediately surrounding her. Their body language is aggressive. She's defensive, but calm. The manager said the police were satisfied that no crime had occurred. Bridget was free to go. They appreciated her assistance in ensuring the child's safety. Bridget noticed what was missing: an apology, acknowledgement that she had been treated as a criminal despite being innocent. Bridget stood. She asked to speak with the police officers directly. The manager looked nervous, but agreed. The 2 officers were in the lobby. Bridget approached calmly. She said she appreciated that they had reviewed the evidence. She wanted to ensure they understood what had actually happened because the initial response had been inappropriate and potentially dangerous. She explained that she was a pediatric intensive care nurse. When she found an unattended infant in distress, her medical training required her to ensure the child's immediate safety. She had acted appropriately and professionally. The response from security and police had been to treat her as a criminal, to detain her, to make her wait under guard while they verified something the surveillance footage could have shown them immediately. She said this slowly, clearly, without anger in her voice, but making certain they understood. One officer said they had to respond to the report they received. A missing baby. A woman was found with the baby. They had to investigate. Bridget said the investigation was appropriate. Immediate assumption of guilt was not. She had provided identification, nursing credentials, conference badge, explanation. All footage was reviewed. The decision to treat her as a suspect, rather than a witness or helper, revealed something uncomfortable about their assumptions. The officer was quiet. Then they apologized if she felt the situation was handled poorly. Bridget said she didn't feel it was handled poorly. It was objectively handled poorly, and she would be filing a formal complaint with hotel management and the police department, not out of vindictiveness, but because the next black woman who helps a child in distress shouldn't face what she just experienced. Have you ever had to educate the people who wronged you while they were still refusing to fully apologize? Share your experience below. The hotel manager said that wouldn't be necessary. They could resolve this internally. Bridget said no. This would be documented formally. Bridget filed formal complaints with the hotel chain's corporate office, the police department's civilian oversight board, and the state nursing board's professional advocacy division. She documented the incident in detail: timeline, names, specific statements. The delay in reviewing surveillance footage, despite its immediate availability. She also contacted the pediatric nursing conference organizers, informed them that their attendees were being treated as criminals by hotel security. The conference had contracted with this hotel for 3 years. That relationship needed to be reconsidered. The hotel chain's regional director contacted Bridget directly within 72 hours. He said the incident was being investigated. The security guard, Gerald Pritchard, was being retrained. The hotel manager was receiving coaching on implicit bias and de-escalation. Bridget said retraining wasn't sufficient. She said the immediate assumption that a black woman with a baby was a kidnapper rather than a helper revealed systemic bias. The failure to review readily available surveillance footage before detention revealed poor judgment. The absence of an immediate apology after her innocence was established revealed a cultural problem. She said she wanted policy changes. Security protocols required an evidence review before detaining guests. Mandatory implicit bias training for all staff. Clear procedures for handling situations involving children that don't default to suspicion based on the race of the person helping. The regional director agreed to all requests. He also offered Bridget compensation for the experience. Financial settlement, free hotel stays, conference reimbursement. Bridget declined the money. She said she didn't need compensation. She needed systemic change, so this didn't happen to others. But she did request one thing. She wanted to speak to the baby's mother. The hotel arranged it. The mother came to the lobby. She looked embarrassed. She said she had been terrified when her baby disappeared. She had reacted emotionally. She apologized for not thanking Bridget immediately. Bridget said she understood fear. But fear had made everyone in that lobby see a black woman as dangerous rather than helpful. That was the problem that needed addressing. The mother nodded. She said her daughter had been safe because Bridget had acted with competence and care. She was grateful. She was also ashamed that her first response had been suspicion. Bridget appreciated the honesty. She said that was what growth looked like. The hotel chain implemented new security protocols across all properties. Staff training included scenarios specifically addressing bias in emergencies. Security teams were taught to review available evidence before making detentions. Guest services received education on recognizing helpful behavior versus suspicious behavior. The policy changes were named the Coleman Protocols after Bridget. She was invited to consult on their development and provide input based on her experience. The police department revised its response procedures for calls involving children and potential abductions. Officers were trained to distinguish between witnesses, helpers, and actual suspects. They were required to review surveillance footage immediately when available, rather than relying solely on preliminary reports. Bridget returned to her work at the hospital. She continued saving children's lives. She continued being excellent at her job. But the experience had reinforced something she already knew. Competence and credentials didn't protect you from bias. Being right didn't prevent being suspected. She spoke at the next pediatric nursing conference about the incident, not as a victim story, as an example of how bias operated even in helping professions, how medical professionals of color faced additional scrutiny and suspicion when acting within their expertise. Systemic change required documentation, formal complaints, and refusal to accept inadequate responses. Her presentation was attended by over 300 nurses. Many shared similar experiences: being questioned when helping children in public, being assumed to be nannies or kidnappers rather than parents or professionals, having their credentials doubted, their intentions are questioned. Bridget facilitated a working group that developed best practices for healthcare professionals who encountered bias while providing emergency assistance. Document everything. Identify yourself clearly and repeatedly. Request supervisors. File formal complaints. Demand policy changes. Never accept dismissal or an inadequate apology. The resources were distributed through national nursing organizations. Thousands of healthcare workers accessed them. The documentation helped other professionals protect themselves while protecting vulnerable populations. 2 years after the incident, Bridget received an award from the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners for advocacy and systemic change. The award recognized her work creating protocols that protected both children and the professionals who helped them. In her acceptance speech, she said something that stayed with attendees. She said helping shouldn't require courage. Doing the right thing shouldn't be dangerous. But until systems changed to recognize helping behavior, instead of punishing it based on who was helping, professionals of color would continue to need both courage and documentation in equal measure. If this story resonates with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments, have you ever been accused of the opposite of what you were actually doing? Here is what Bridget's story teaches us. First, maternal behavior and protective instincts are interpreted differently based on who demonstrates them. When Bridget picked up a crying baby, security saw kidnapping. If a white woman had done the identical action, they likely would have been seen as helping. This disparity isn't theoretical. Studies show black women are less likely to be perceived as mothers, caregivers, or protective figures. Society's image of maternal care is racialized. When people of color demonstrate nurturing behavior, it's viewed through suspicion rather than recognized for what it is. This bias doesn't just insult individuals. It actively prevents children from receiving help from capable people who fear being misidentified as threats. Second, surveillance evidence exists, but institutions choose when to review it based on who they've already decided is guilty. The footage was immediately available. Hotel security chose to detain Bridget first and review evidence later. This pattern repeats across contexts. Evidence that could exonerate people of color is delayed, ignored, or dismissed, while evidence that appears incriminating is prioritized. If institutions genuinely valued truth, they would review objective evidence before making accusations. The fact that they don't reveals that assumptions drive their process, not investigation. Real procedural justice requires evidence first, conclusions second. That order matters. Third, professional credentials and expertise are ignored when they contradict racial stereotypes. Bridget identified herself as a pediatric nurse immediately. She provided a nursing license, conference badge, and medical reasoning for her actions. None of it mattered until surveillance footage made her innocence undeniable. This is the exhausting reality for professionals of color. Credentials that would grant immediate credibility to white professionals are treated as claims requiring verification. Expertise that would be trusted automatically is viewed skeptically. Organizations that claim to value qualifications reveal they actually value qualifications plus racial comfort. One without the other isn't sufficient for trust. Fourth, feeling like situations were handled poorly isn't the same as acknowledging they objectively were. The officer's response, if she felt the situation was mishandled, is classic deflection. Bridget didn't have hurt feelings. She was objectively treated as a criminal despite being innocent. She was detained without evidence. She was questioned aggressively despite providing documentation. These were factual errors in procedure, not subjective perceptions. When institutions deflect valid criticism by framing it as someone's feelings rather than their failures, they're avoiding accountability. Real accountability requires naming what actually happened, not suggesting the person who experienced it is merely sensitive. If you're in this situation, identify yourself immediately and repeatedly. State your credentials and professional role clearly. If you have identification or badges, present them. Request that available surveillance footage be reviewed before any detention. Document the names of everyone involved and the exact statements made. Request supervisors immediately. Remain calm regardless of how you're treated, because anger will be used against you. File formal complaints through every available channel afterward. Demand policy changes, not just an apology. And remember that being treated as guilty while innocent is not your failure. It's evidence of institutional bias that requires systematic correction. Helping should never require defending yourself from those you're helping. When doing the right thing makes you a suspect, the problem isn't your action. It's the system that can't recognize care when it comes from unexpected sources. Change that system, or watch it continue punishing people whose crime is helping, while not matching assumptions about who helpers should be.